I found a blog about it's like an optimization engineer who's constantly late, and he's got pro tips for navigating for people who are constantly late. And like tip number 1, never pick a route with choke points. And I was like, damn, that's so smart. Like he's 100% right. Because I've gotten caught short a couple of times and I got stuck on the Bond Bridge.
Yeah, but the thing is you rely on Google Maps now to get you from A to B in a particular amount of time.
Rather than figuring out your own.
But is it a guy thing or is it just like a competitive person thing to like always try and beat the Google Maps route?
Oh, no, that's me.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I need to save at least a minute or two. I see the figure and I'm like, you're wrong.
But when you start taking those evasive actions to avoid certain areas, certain bottlenecks, you often make things worse. So
Yeah. Or like just to be that prick coming up Newton Gully where you're like, there's the long line of traffic waiting in the left lane. You're like, I'm just going to pick the right lane.
Yeah.
And I'm going to wait till I see someone on their phone. I'm going to cut in front of them.
Darren. Yeah.
What does it mean to have a human in the loop?
Human in the loop.
Human in the loop. What in the world is a human in the loop?
Being a human in the loop.
AI in the loop. Humans in charge.
Welcome to Human in the Loop.
So, what are we talking about today? The intersection of AI and human creativity. How AI augments, not replaces creative professionals. Adapting business. I think this is one thing I'm most interested to dive into, but we'll see where the conversation takes us. Adapting business models for AI, because Heath has literally moved into the physical world of photo taking into something very AI-ish. And I feel like you were the first person I saw doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we were one of the first in the
You're
world.
like, I'm not going to be Kodak.
I did. Further down the road, I found a guy in Denmark who was doing exactly the same thing, but that was kind of after we launched. But when we started it, when I started digging into it, I guess I kind of saw the potential pretty quickly for it to be paradigm shifting, you know. And I thought that we were in a race. I thought that everyone else had seen the exact same thing and that we weren't talking about it, but we were all going to launch the same business, you know. So we just worked around the clock tirelessly for about 3 months to just build this portfolio of work and then got it out into the world and no one else was doing the same thing. And we were out in the wind just... And kind of in the early days, we were kind of pariahs in the photography industry a little bit for leaning into the technology as well. So the first 3 to 6 months was pretty ugly and pretty lonely.
Did you start to question like, fuck, what have we done?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
That's how you know you nailed it.
The work didn't come in immediately either. You know, there was work, but it was a slow build, and people kind of have and still do have apprehension about leaning into AI, which is kind of weird, you know. But the same people.
What's the top-sided reason? And what's the body language? Because people say stuff, but they mean something else.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know the justification behind it, but AI is kind of a bit of a boogeyman at the moment. You know, people are worried that it's going to take away jobs. So they don't want to be seen as the person who's fully endorsing it. But they want all the things that it offers. So they're curious and they'll dip their toes in, they'll ask questions and they'll get spec work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time doing kind of test work off my own bat that I can then promote. Meanwhile, we're doing really good work for good clients, but they're apprehensive about discussing it openly that it's AI.
Yep, we have that too to a degree. There's a lot of case studies that we have to hold back for a really long time. People just don't want to give away their secrets, but I feel like that's a New Zealand problem too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely within the artist community more pushback against the use of AI than, for instance, engineering, right? You get some engineers who are like, I don't find this useful. Yeah. And that's definitely for some use cases, right? It's still, like in some cases it's amazing, in some cases you'll argue with it for hours and it just can't do basic stuff and you're like, this tool's useless and it's never going to, you know, you get frustrated with it when it's not doing what you want it to. Yeah. But in AI art, it was a lot more persistent, like activism to be like, you shouldn't be using AI. This is like, it's almost like labor union sort of, you know, this is this is dangerous to the industry. We're already not getting paid very well. We're already, you know, one of the most abused classes in commercial engagement, and this is just another tool to let capital take that little piece of power that we've built for ourselves and shift it to someone else.
Well, I mean, traditionally trained creatives are really protective of what they've invested their entire lives into learning, right? And they see that this is going to streamline or take away that and potentially take away jobs at the end of the day as well. We saw with the photography industry that traditionally trained photographers were like, I don't want anything to do with this because it's scary, right? I was excited about it because we started digging into it and I started going, shit, this can be done, and the savings potentially, the effort savings on going to location, or, hiring an expensive home, schlepping their stuff out of it, moving your stuff in, or the location recce's, the available light, all of those elements you can kind of take away. And I was excited about the idea of that because I've been shooting for 20 years and I know how hard doing some of that stuff is, and low return, and I was excited about doing it a different way. But a lot of people just see the fact that might go away altogether. But I think realistically a hybrid model is where the future really is, and slowly over time I'm starting to see more and more photographers around the world start to go, hey, look at what I just did. This is, I've started experimenting and combining my traditional skills with emerging technology and hey, look at the results. So it's nice to finally kind of two years later to see some other people joining into the race as well, and it makes me kind of feel like the tide is turning finally.
But I think that's partly like at the time when there was, because I was on the other side, right? I was writing software to do AI art, and so I would deliberately not enter artist spaces anyway, right? Like I was a nerd guy doing nerd stuff, but even in nerd spaces you'd get people saying like, this is anti-artist and you shouldn't be doing this. And my pushback at the time was, you don't actually hate AI, you hate capitalism, right? This is inevitable. As soon as, especially for commercial work, if you can save 20% or 30%, that's going to happen, right? Like that's such a huge, it
already has happened with the movement into, that's why Rush got out of game development, outsourcing. Because Argentina, Vietnam, all of these places with huge talent were getting, economies were improving, and you can't compete. Like, it was 30% immediate cost saving, at least, maybe 50, 60% just from labor arbitrage.
And it's not just cost saving too, it's kind of opening up creative avenues that just weren't there as well before,
totally. Or would cost so much that they're not practical, right? Like, yes, you can take your product all around the world and do a location shot in 20 different countries, but you don't have a $50 million advertising budget, so...
Yeah, I mean, at the absolute kind of nuts and bolts level, we did a kitchen handle shoot for a high-end New Zealand kitchen handle company, and they had 217 kitchen handles or something, and we put every single one of those in situ into a scene. And the likelihood of ever doing that in real life is absolutely zero. Finding 217 homes or building 217 kitchen sets just wouldn't ever happen. So it's opened up avenues that just weren't there before. And even though that particular part of photography is not that exciting, but it's what we do as well. We're focused on product, and I've always really kind of enjoyed the retail side of things.
And I think that's where sort of the business opportunity with the AI creativity kind of sits. It's the boring work. Like the really boring work, right?
Well, we call it elevated ecom. It's kind of the sweet spot, I think. Presenting a product in a space that you couldn't have done previously, or at great cost.
And it's definitely already pretty much eliminated some sections of the artist economy. Right, like there was a huge artist economy in basically fan drawings. Right, like I've got this character, can you draw it for me? Or I want Mickey Mouse doing this, and it was all like Fiverr and commission stuff. And that's basically dead now because like people can, especially the stuff that's a bit pervy, you don't want to talk to a human about it in the first place.
Or the romantic fan fiction.
The romantic in italics.
And then stock photography, right? Like, it still kind of exists, but
it's on its last legs.
You can, like, why would you pick something that somebody else could be using and doesn't really fit your mood or style? It's just sort of a close match when you could get exactly what you want, right?
And that's where you need, like, citing trend forecasters' death to stock is maybe one of the few who do it differently.
But they don't really sell stock photography. They sell their trend vision, right? Like they sell the style and their curation, and that's the thing that AI is currently not that great at.
But that's the new frontier of creativity, I think, too. Yeah. It's the curation side of things. You know, the people who will succeed are the people who have a real clear eye and definitive idea about what's hot, you know.
Yeah.
Because they can then create that at very minimal cost.
Yeah.
Does everyone understand or know about the history of the fashionable pineapple?
No.
Oh my God, yes, I do. I actually do, but you go on and tell the story about pineapples.
Well, it's quite fascinating because in Victorian England, it got ridiculous. Basically, to own a pineapple was considered, you would have to be, actually literally you had to be royalty to own a pineapple.
Because they had to import them, right?
They had to import them. And there was this weird thing. So the entire reason it went viral, is because it was actually a military flex. So the Portuguese or the Spanish, I think it was the Portuguese, brought pineapples back from quite some distance away. And because of the way that the Spaniards and the Portuguese had split I don't know if people know this, but there was a set of islands off the coast of Africa, and the Portuguese and the Spanish decided the left side belonged to the Spanish and the right side belonged to the Portuguese, depending on which way you look at the world, which is so screwed up. But it also just reminds you that the world in its current state isn't actually that effed up. It's actually just repeating history. Anyway, so because of the distances involved, the Portuguese, I believe it was the Portuguese, either Portuguese or the Spanish, were able to bring back the pineapples fresh or without completely rotting, all the way back to their kings. And the British East India Company was also trying to do this, but every time they brought the pineapples back to Britain, their ships were too slow. So the pineapples would come rotten, and that became the fad. And then it took another level when the British developed the Interceptor, which is a super fast naval vessel. And that's the one that, they talk about the British, the Spanish Armada, where a handful of British ships took out an entire Spanish Armada. The Interceptor was the technology that enabled that. Basically, when they developed the Interceptor, they were able to bring back the pineapples fresh. And so the King of England at the time wanted the Spanish to know they had fast ships. And basically, he made it really important that everyone knew that they had fresh pineapples, because he didn't want to escalate. So he was like, he just wanted to flex. And his passive flex was, we got fast ships, bro. And then that spread into all of the blue bloods, basically, around England. And then it became this crazy fad. And they were paying something like £10,000 at the time to buy a rotting pineapple.
Not to eat,
not to eat,
table.
to put on the
carry
table.
around to parties.
Yeah.
But that's how it's also ended up in so much art and architectural flashings and things around like pineapples as decoration.
Yeah, it got ridiculous. There's like old English buildings where the dome in the center of the building is actually a pineapple with leaves and stuff, and it's like massive. It's like and it was Dole in Hawaii in the 40s. Something like that commoditized that away. So they were really popular right up until like 1930. They were hard to get, super low volumes, very expensive. That's the story of the pineapple and disruption in technology. And I think you should take solace in the fact that humans have always been a little fucking crazy.
All right, I'm going to bring us back on track.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting division because it's one of those spaces. It's one of those spaces that AI is not going to be able to replace, right? Like it can't make food for us, and like we're so driven by physical needs of the body.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You can plug in with humanoid robots, man.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. I mean, that's coming in the future, right? But I mean, there is still a lot of areas in life that won't be affected. I think won't be massively affected.
It makes me wonder though if we've even imagined the ways in which it might change.
No,
our brains are a bit limited.
Sure.
I want to come back for a second to the artist versus creative, and maybe this is just the art school snob in me. So we used to use the word artist at art school for anyone who was doing painting and did traditional art. And anyone that desired to get a job out of art school in advertising or commercial creativity was deemed a sellout. Like, not fair, but true. And there is this interesting tension where and I'm not supporting this, I don't think it's right, but if your bread and butter has been selling creativity, and then the sellability of your skills starts to disappear because a robot can do it faster, better, it's not your artistry that's going. It's your ability to make money off your creativity. And those are you could still be an artist, and that's why starving artists are a thing, right?
Yeah.
So preserving your art is one thing. Making money off your creativity, and I guess it's just an interesting distinction because having something take away your money-making ability is a problem, but having your art ripped off, that's a separate problem. And sometimes they get muddied. And I think when the artists are getting really frustrated or a commercial creative is getting frustrated, like if you write a book or a movie and that gets fed into a language model. I have a friend who's an author and she's had 3 of her books ripped by Facebook. And now that's fed, and that's unfair.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the unfair time in history where some jobs are no longer jobs humans should be doing.
I mean, it's happened time and time again in history, you know. CAD, synthesizers, you know, the loom, all of these things have happened over time that have dramatically changed the way we do work, you know, and it's mass kind of automation. But it often doesn't take away the work altogether. It amplifies or changes or shifts or expands the potential, you know. And that's what you know, CAD didn't take away architecture jobs. Yeah. People just learned to integrate it into their workflow. You know?
And if anything, it has a growth effect.
Sure.
You know,
it
advances
certainly speed, you know.
And complexity. You can do more complex stuff. Like there'll be, like what you're doing, marrying real photography with AI generated photography is an additional capability.
And
right?
just because the tools exist doesn't mean everyone can go out and make kind of groundbreaking work with them, you know. Like the basic baseline output level of a lot of the platforms is pretty good, and that's about as far as most people ever get, particularly people who don't have a storytelling or craft kind of background. They just type in some prompts and they go, oh, this is nice, and it just goes out to the world as part of the just kind of sea of AI slop. But it's the people who have the backgrounds in storytelling and craft and making stuff that emotes, that can actually push the tools a little bit further and actually start to create something. Just because CAD exists doesn't mean that I can go and design a house. You know, I don't have that skill set, you know. And a lot of people don't have that skill set with imagery either, but there's been a kind of massive democratization of the process. Anyone can go in and do it. But it's not at a decent level. It's not at a high level. So
everyone from like really beautiful handwritten advertising, sign writing, font structure, then you get desktop computing and you have nice fonts. It's still a very specific skill to be able to lay up type that looks good to the eye. And you know, when you've got a background in photography, translating that skill set over to what you do. Like you said, not everybody can do it.
No, not at all.
I think when you're facing disruption like this, the only advice that really counts is you have more control than you think. And typically it's the people that wait and do nothing that get massively affected by step changes in society and technology.
And that's I guess, and a lot of people like you know, from the creative community are up in arms, or I guess I'm more pragmatic than that, and I just kind of, you're either part of the steamroller or you're part of the road essentially, and I could see that coming, and you know, I've got a horse in that race too. You know, like we have created imagery over a long amount of time, and some of that's probably been used in the data set as well. I could feign outrageous indignation, you know, but I don't. I'm more interested in the potential of what's coming, rather than what's happened, you know.
So what did it take to pivot your business? Because you're in this with guys you've been working with, and we never did an introduction. So for context, I don't know if you know this, I was starting to tell Hamish.
Hey.
Heath and
Shit,
there's this guy here, his name is Heath.
Didn't see you there, Heath.
Heath and I worked together more than 20 years ago. Saying that makes my knees hurt.
You said 2 years ago, right? More than 2 years. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. We worked together on,
Good save.
I mean, I was a farmer's suit in advertising, and Heath ran the photography studio. So our world was in pulling together farmers.
Capital F farmers.
Yeah, capital F Farmers. Farmers Trading
Apostrophe
Company,
S.
the New Zealand department store. I
Not-
worked on the fashion side of the business, pulling together the, new season fashion photography, and we would book models and we would book houses. And so it was really interesting to me to watch, because we've always stayed connected on socials and stuff, to watch from afar as AI is happening around us in the tech business. And I'm like, why did you pick it up so fast? And the business pivot, and I think the start was you've worked with the same couple of guys for a while, so for you all to be quite aligned on a really massive shift. Tell us the story.
Whether or not we're all perfectly aligned, I don't know.
Who did you drag kicking and screaming?
Both of them, but we were all amazed. Like we were, because we've been working together about 15 years up until that point. So over time, your energy shifts, right? We don't message each other at night about stuff that's happening anymore. It's just we've spent our lives around each other. When this happened, when we started mucking around with this, all of that energy came back. And we were, up till all hours going, look at this, look what I've done, look at this. And we were buzzing, and it was really cool. But we were just doing weird shit at that stage. We were just kind
turning
of
yourself into Muppets.
Yeah. And I was doing Street Fighter 2 characters as in the modern day as having like existential crises over just being road workers and regular shit like that. And I thought it was just hilarious. And they thought it was hilarious. And we were just, just flinging ideas back and forth, which is cool. But after a while, I was kind of like, what is this doing for our business? Absolutely nothing. But the potential's there to do something. We just need to figure out what that something is. And then, funnily enough, we had a new client of the photography studio say, hey, look, I've had these backgrounds generated. Can you shoot my product in a cohesive way and complement? Okay, I'll have a look at it. And because we'd done a lot of comp work before and that kind of thing. And I was expecting the backgrounds to be really shit, and they were really amazing. So at that stage, I was like, this is a thing. This is that line of thinking is something, shooting real world product and then comping it into the background. You got all the controllables of shooting in studio, but you get the location image at the end. So yeah, I guess the boys were less into it because they are the traditional creatives out of all of us,
They wanted to buy nuclear boats, didn't they?
Potentially. But no, over time, we did more and more of the work, and we saw that it was possible, and we saw how people were responding to it, and things just kind of snowballed. Why we went so early, I don't know. We're all pretty risk averse, so it's not a thing, and we've been shooting together for 15 years. The studio's gone really well over that period of time. We've had as much work as we can ever deal with, which is not really the same across the industry. People have been struggling for quite a long time.
Have you thought about how you would scale the business? Because these weird niches are what Sir Paul Callahan loves about New Zealand companies.
Yeah.
And yours isn't quite a weird niche. It's quite a, I think, mainstream niche in some weird way. But it reminds me of this website called remove.bg. It just does one thing.
Yeah.
Removes
background.
Yeah.
And it kind of went viral in Mac operator kind of circles because that task is just laborious and pointless.
Oh,
and
sure.
Yeah.
Still
Farmers,
now
the
there's-
amount of
there's
time we used to spend clear cutting models.
Yep.
Far out.
Now there's tools, segment anything tools that are just integrated into every program now.
Yeah.
Canva's got their own one, Midjourney's got their own one. You just click, select an object, remove background, it's done in 1 second,
Yeah.
Scalability, not really, because the work itself relies a lot on our individual skill sets. So we can't really bring people on board quickly because they don't have that skill set that studio craft that we've built up over kind of 20 years.
But couldn't you get people to send you products? Because there's this entire economy of people getting drop shipping shit off Temu and rebranding it and then reselling it.
Yeah, there's a solution for everyone, but they're all quite time consuming at this stage. So it's not really suited to the kind of low end work. At this stage, with the amount of kind of man hours that we have to put into it, it's still suited to kind of big ticket items, stuff that's either physically hard to shoot or expensive.
That low cost stuff, they don't have to comply with New Zealand advertising laws or anything anyway, right? So they don't even bother having the product before they generate the AI imagery.
Yeah.
Like
And
there's the famous example of the like the Viking net sweater. and it looks amazing, like, because it's just AI generated, right? Like, if you look at the details, the interlaced patterns don't line up properly.
Yeah.
But when you order it, it's literally just the image screen printed on like a polyester long-sleeve t-shirt.
Oh, we've all been there.
Interestingly enough, I've seen fashion brands lately start to push product before it's ever been created, right? So
Yeah.
it's clearly a GPT or a Sora kind of image.
Yeah,
and they're selling a design, or at least testing the market, how the market will
I think
respond
it's
to
Funny
that.
because we've been doing like user validation is a given in tech. You don't release something till you know it's going to be.
It's a bit different with product though,
Yeah.
right? To market something that doesn't exist in the
Do you
real
think that
world
like
just yet.
crowdfunding and crowdsourcing for really cool ideas has just become more embedded? So people are used to wanting to kind of express an interest before they get it, or like pre-ordering albums. Pre-ordering has become, I don't know, I've just seen it in the last few years.
Oh, it's one of the most underutilized business tools. Is pre-ordering, faking a product.
Could we do pre-order professional services? In 3 years, we'll be that much better.
It's definitely an emerging scam issue, though, right? Like if you hang out on TikTok, especially, you'll see a lot of them, right? Like every week there'll be a new viral thing. For a while, there was like the realistic puppy, and it's like a little robot puppy, and they've got these AI ads of like really good-looking puppies. When you get it, it's just that toy, like the wind-up clockwork toy from the 80s that goes, and then does a backflip.
It's a hard lesson when you realise that Instagram ads were not real people talking in testimonial about how amazing it was.
What I'd really, I want to really get inside the mind of the person who buys something and there's no reviews.
Yeah.
Like, and they're the first reviewer. I really want to get inside that person's mind to just be like,
Well,
were you anxious? Because
people love discovering like something no one else has discovered yet, right? They love, like, look at this thing that I found. I'm I've discovered this unique new thing.
Yeah, or this bargain that I've snapped up. That's why
Yeah.
people fall for Facebook Marketplace shit all the time, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
they go,
Yeah.
no one's seen this yet.
It's a weird
And it's-
dopamine thing.
Yeah.
Probably comes, like social validation. And I want to be the person who gets to review. I don't want to be convinced by other people.
yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's got to shift. We were using crowdsourcing to validate whether or not products are good or not. I think it's probably going to move to more private groups and, specialty groups. And
Well, I mean, that stuff's all out there on Reddit at the moment, right? I typically, if I was looking at projectors the other day, I was going to buy a projector, and there's Google reviews, and then there's Reddit. But from Reddit, you're getting the real, authentic nuts and bolts.
And then there's
right?
Perplexity, which will give you the
I think
best of
that-
both worlds.
I think that's on its way out as well.
There's already evidence that people are using AI bots to sediment on Reddit. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's too popular. It's been
What
identified
was
as like
the
a
university that's in a lot of hot water for doing that?
Yeah.
Finnish university or something that's in
How do you handle trust, which is the issue we're talking about there? I mean, does it come up?
Or
Because
is
those
it-
kitchen handles,
Or is it on the
for
customer?
example, they're not in real kitchens, but a customer doesn't know that, right?
No, but it's the real handle, you know. And I guess that's what kind of makes our
When does a spoon become a shovel?
makes our process a bit more transparent and trustworthy. You're seeing the real item that we've physically handled and shot, and you're getting real textures, that water gets a little muddied when you kind of move into LoRa's and stuff that's generating stuff completely. The LoRa's trained on the product images.
I know what a LoRa is, but for anyone who doesn't, can you please explain what a LoRa is?
So a LoRa is a low rank adaptation. Up until now, with AI, there's no specificity. You can't say, you want a 1987 Pontiac kind. It can't create something exactly because it's trained on so many things. The data set's 5 billion images, and if a million of those are of a series of cars, then it's going to generate a kind of median idea of those cars. Yeah. A LoRa is like a plug-in almost of specific information on a particular thing, on a particular person, or on a particular product, or on a particular style. And then if you're able to trigger that LoRa correctly through your prompting, then it will generate that thing into those images.
But is there ownership around that?
How do you know?
If you were a brand,
Yeah.
let's say you are the car brand, do you have ownership over the LoRa of the car
Sure.
so that...
Yeah, you do. I mean, you do it all privately.
Right.
I mean, the LoRa is a type of training. And so the same intellectual property issues with training generally also apply to creating low-ras, right? So one of the first uses for them as soon as they were invented was copying a specific artist's style, right? So I've got Stable Diffusion. I want it to look like this particular artist.
Yeah.
Training Stable Diffusion and doing a full training run is too expensive. You need loads of GPUs. But you can train a low-ra reasonably cheaply, and I can just give it like 20 different images of this artist and have it be able to produce images in that artist's style really quickly. So obviously you don't have any ownership over and the whole copyright thing is like it's still working its way through the courts. I don't think anyone could claim that they held intellectual property in that low-ra. If you own a trademark or if you own a dress mark or anything like that, you continue to hold that, whether it's in a output of an AI or a physical thing. But yeah, I guess do your contracts like specifically have
we have an AI
constraint
specific contract because the typical photography contract just didn't cover what we needed it to. So in the early days, we dealt with a lawyer who dealt with that in particular. I mean, it is interesting territory, and anything in the style of is real murky, and it comes down to the creator. The responsibilities on the creator to not do shitty things. Don't copy other people's work. But that's the same in the real world as well with traditional artistry. Don't copy other people's work and you won't get in trouble, It's just a lot easier to mimic that work now, and anyone can do it, But I guess I've spent 20 years in the industry and I've got a really good understanding of copyright and copyright law and what's okay and what's not okay, and how far you can push things without treading on someone's toes, It's you can say a color grade in the style of Wes Anderson. That's not an issue. You're talking about a small part of that person's work, But once you start trying to copy a person's work, then that's an issue. But that's a nuanced understanding that not everyone's kind of got, So I think the tool is there for any old person to directly mimic someone's work, and there's going to be lots of that, because. Not a lot of people have got the kind of background that we've got in terms of creating the imagery, but
that does tend to lead to some of the worst AI slop too.
Yes.
Right? In the style of Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson has like a quite evolved style.
Sure.
It's not just like you can't just say everything matches this exact criteria, right? You can generally look at a movie and be like, pretty sure this is a Wes Anderson.
Yeah,
I get that sort of
100%.
sense of style, but you can't just then say that's like in the style of Wes Anderson is sufficient as a descriptor to give you the output you want, right? And so you see these really generic, like basically it's symmetrical and it's got color grade and everyone's wearing clothes from the 70s. And that's about as clear, it's as detailed as it gets. It's not going to be like Astro City versus some of his earlier stuff, right?
Yeah, I think there was like one thing that stood out to me. The shorts that they released on Netflix? And they had one about with Benedict Cumberbatch in it.
Yeah, his the Roald Dahl stories.
Yeah. And there was like one real nifty, very Wes Anderson trick that doesn't exist anywhere else. He had to make one of the characters float, and he did that with like sort of parallaxed boxes.
Yeah.
So it did look like he was floating, but it was clearly just a bunch of boxes, so that person was sitting there, and you're like, that's not replicated anywhere. That's 100% Wes Anderson original. And only Wes Anderson would have
come up with that.
So those are the things, those are the cues that, because AI is just a big pattern matching scam.
Sure.
Sorry, did I say that out loud?
There's other things that
those are the things that
outside of the norm that can't be replicated.
Yeah, and when you prompt it for creativity, it's still a pattern extrapolation.
Yeah.
So patterns it hasn't seen, to us, they look like completely novel things, but the truth is probably that we haven't seen a data set of 5 billion images. So we couldn't possibly comprehend what a composition of those images could possibly entail.
Also, if you see a white color and a black color, and I say, give me a color in between those that's completely novel that no one's ever seen, right? You're going to be able to come up with a shade of gray that is so specific that no one's ever used that exact shade of gray before, right? But you're not going to come up with purple or green.
You're the kind of person that's trying to say they invented a new color. I don't believe someone has invented a new color.
But I think human creativity...
That story is dumb. I'm just going to say that right now.
I think human creativity should probably, mathematically speaking, sit outside the data set. And that's probably where where the creative industry really needs to head towards.
Sure. And I do workshops and I talk to agencies, and almost every time someone says, "Are we going to lose our jobs? Are we, is this the end for us? Like, are you good at your job?
Probably not. Yeah.
Are you good at your job?
Are you a person who copies other people?
Yeah.
Because like with Wes Anderson, there's a look and a colour palette and a symmetry. There's also incredible direction of actors so that they perform in a way that's unlike other movies. There's pacing and all of these variables, and a regular person isn't going to do that. So I'm sure that he is not worried. He's like, there's people copying him left, right, and centre. No one is him.
If you bring something exceptional to the table, you'll never be replaced.
Yeah.
But if you're one of the people who's just kind of coasted and just done average work and got away with it for a long time, then you're quite easily replaced.
And even interpersonally, you have to be a nice human being to work with. Like, if you're doing maybe less...
What's my excuse?
You're hanging on by a thread.
I really am.
In the photography space, there's maybe like
videos.
how you speak to models and how you speak to clients and how you take direction and lighting and all of that. Some of those things can be dealt with, but you still have to work with other human beings and convince them of value.
I think there is a legitimate threat, though, and a lot of commercial work. They don't actually want creativity.
No.
Right? Like some commercial work, they're like, we want you to do the best work, right? But a lot of it is just...
sparing these days,
and so in that case, yes, somebody whose value is their creativity could be replaced because the purchaser doesn't actually really want that creativity.
They just want
the box ticked. And that was their only source of getting that box ticked was creative people.
And one other thing is I think when we look at artificial intelligence and it's like it appears to be a point solution, even VO3 and all of those movie generating, the underlying creativity is not necessarily just in the aesthetic or how it's filmed or how the actors are acting, but they talk a lot about their creative process, and the creative process always revolves around the emotion. And while creativity fundamentally revolves around the emotion it evokes, and that's a person-to-person thing. So eventually, I do believe machines will try to articulate some form of emotion, and then we're probably in super grey waters. But we should be on Mars by then or something. But
I'm doing a pretty good simulation of them.
Yeah, I know this prototype over here is great. But we can't.
This thing called love.
He's a dot matrix printer. His voice cords are a dot matrix printer. Apparently, we can't have a podcast about creativity and not talk about copyright.
Yeah.
What is copyright? I'm so confused now.
So, I mean, anyone who creates images, certainly in New Zealand, anyone who creates imagery is entitled to copyright to that, and it's automatic upon creation. So all of the images that we've ever created at the studio are copyright to us. And if someone were to then mimic that style, they'd be in violation of our copyright. Though typically with kind of product and studio photography, there's no real kind of copyright to violate, right? Because anyone can create standard product photographs. But someone with a clearly identifiable style that then other people are trying to copy or mimic, that's a real issue. Interestingly enough, New Zealand is one of the only kind of 3 countries in the world, I think, where you can copyright AI-generated artwork. And that goes back to our Copyright Act, which was written or amended in 2008 to include digital artwork, which was before AI, obviously, but it hasn't been amended since. But they've kind of determined that AI-generated artwork fits into that category. And that will all kind of change over time because things are happening, like you've seen in the States. That's been through the Copyright Office in the States, and they've made a ruling essentially that as long as you have a kind of complex workflow and you can prove that your generations are based on more than just basic prompts, then you have the ability to copyright AI-generated work over there.
The American system's a bit, I don't know if it's different to New Zealand, but they specifically only let you copyright the creative element. So you can have a work and 98% of it is not protected. It's only the creative element that went into that work that is the protected element. And so they've said like the actual use of an AI there's no creative element in the output of the AI, but you can add creative elements
Sure.
on top of that, and that's the bit that's protectable.
And there was a labor threshold or something, right? Like more than an hour or
Sort of.
something
I mean,
like
there's
that.
I didn't read that part, but
I think that they were using it as an example. Maybe it's not.
Okay.
Maybe it just forms part of the precedence.
There's a really good YouTube lawyer breakdown whose reference we'll have to add as a little subtext afterwards,
Right
breaking down
here.
like the comedian, the artwork that's a banana that's taped to a wall with like a piece of duct tape. It's a different banana every time because, of course, the banana rots, right? So the actual artwork is the instructions for like how to go and select the banana and then how to, and then there's like a whole breakdown. It's like, is this like, it's a banana taped to a wall? Is this copyrightable? Like, how is it copyrightable?
So it's funny, that's exactly the kind of art conversation, having just visited a modern art museum with an engineer and stood in front of a Jackson Pollock, and this is Derek, and he's like, but why is it art? I could do that. And I'm like, oh, child, you're talking to an art history major. Like, there are factors of social and economic things at play from that very specific time.
Were you staring at the Campbell soup? What were you looking at?
We were looking at a Jackson Pollock.
Yeah,
I
which
think.
one?
It might have been. It wasn't Blue Poles.
Oh, right.
Pollock,
Oh, sorry,
it's like-
Pollock, not Warhol.
And then I'm like,
Yeah.
and you have to appreciate, the alcoholism and his relationship dynamics and what he was rebelling against. And if you get really close, you'll see his cigarette butts and his flicked bottle caps. And this was on the ground, and it was so physical, and he's jabbing paint cans with like a screwdriver. Yeah, you can do that. But the fact that it hadn't been done at that time and that he was responding to the things around him, that's the art. And if you are only looking at the output and you're ignoring everything that came before it, you're going to have a really hard time assessing modern art. And if you just want to look at something nice, look at a photo, look at a Vermeer, look at Leonardo, if you think that that's the pinnacle of art, but it's movement and mental beyond that. And when I think about AI and people are thinking about GenAI as the thing, there's so much more to it.
But there's also Hamish's point about capitalism. Like when we talk about the value of art, scarcity is what drives the value of art. So the death of the artist is crucial.
Especially when there's intent, right? Like Duchamp's ready-mades are like a classic example, right? Like they're literally just a toilet that he bought, right? But to the extent that there's any art and like, I'm of the realist side of like, this is pretty hard to justify personally. Yeah. But like the art is the intent of the purchase because there's no shortage of toilets. Like I could go and buy 30.
Well, the Banksy that self-destructed went from being bought for 1.4 to 25 mil.
But he's interesting because he's not dead, but he's unknown. Yeah. And so the notoriety again becomes the thing.
It's the scarcity, right?
Some element the intent
of like
behind
mystery
it. Buying into it feels like a political action in itself, which again flies in the face of his intention.
Do you follow Justin Boer by any chance?
Yes.
He's so brilliant, isn't he? He's like he's an artist himself, but he's kind of comments on contemporary art more so than kind of modern art, and just the absurdity of all of it, and the art market itself, and the prices that are paid, and what artists think is art in the modern day.
Yeah.
And that's like the ready-mades to me are an interesting correlation with AI prompting, right? Because to an extent, what comes out of the generative tools is related to but not derived completely from the prompt. And so a lot of creating art using generative tools is the discovery of the output. There isn't the intent, right? Like there's some intent in the prompting, but the output is often unrelated to the prompting, and then you're discovering the thing that you like from that output rather than generating different to what you're like. You've got a really specific vision in mind, and you're using the tools like as a very specific outcome. Whereas a lot of AI art is more like I'm giving it this general input, and I'm sort of exploring the space that it gives as an output.
And I mean, we set about with a very kind of clear idea of what we want to create, and I think most people that are starting to use AI, certainly in the advertising space, are the same. You know, they've got a department of creatives who have come up with some ideas. There's not a lot of let's just see where it takes us. You know?
And I think that's probably, I mean, I don't know your experience, but when I've been trying to do things like that, the biggest issue has been the repeatability. Right? Like you submit something, you're like, this is awesome, exactly what I want, but can you move that lamp slightly to the left? It's like, basically no.
And that's been the
in a short sentence.
that's been the issue from the early days,
Yeah.
but we're definitely arriving at a point where the controllability is there. I just don't think it's widespread knowledge that there's enough tools that you can, and certainly if you can start to string different tools together to achieve a certain thing.
Yeah.
But there is control there to be had, and you can make micro changes, and you can repeat images in a style, and you can do those things. You just have to be aware of how to do it. And I think it's certainly in photography, we've had 70 years to learn how to use flash and different camera bodies with different lenses and programs and tools, reflectors, different things. So nothing's really a surprise to us. We know how to take this to make that. Comparatively with GenAI, we've got the same amount of tools dumped on us in 2 years.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out how to use them all, And the answers are all out there. At this stage, I don't think anything's impossible. I think it's all doable. We just have to figure out what to put with what to get from there to there. So there's a lot of experimenting. I find it really hard because I get a call from a different person in a different industry every week going, can we do this? I go, well, I don't really know, to be honest, just yet, but give me a couple of days and I'll figure it out. So there's so much of that. So much of my job at the moment is figuring stuff out before I even send a quote out.
That was a good point to wrap.
That was, but it was good. My last question was going to be, and you're getting there now, what has upskilling looked like? Because one of the biggest things is like you can't pivot your whole business without putting a huge amount of effort into the learning and development. I mean, it's constant and quite exhausting, to be honest, because there's new tools every day and the stress of needing to stay on top of that. If I want to be the person who's leading the way in this industry, in this field, figuring these things out, I need to be across most of those things. But I've also got 2 businesses to run. And a young family, so it's quite hard to juggle all of those things at the moment. But the thing is, I'm really excited about all the stuff as well. So I froth on it, and I'm kind of a massive student of it all, and I'm learning every day, and I'm kind of, my whole career is kind of reinvigorated by that as well. I've always kind of hyper focused on certain things in my life. I've picked a handful of them over my time, and I've really kind of drilled into those things. And fortunately, this is one of them. And because it's constantly evolving, I'm never going to move on from it, I don't think. This is not like other hobbies that I've kind of focused on and then ditched. This is it, man, because the landscape's changing every day, and there's no way to kind of rest on your laurels. You've just got to learn and keep learning. Novelty part of it tickles a lot of neurospicy brains.
Yeah.
Unless Disney wins their lawsuit and they all get shut down for being illegal.
Hey, look, we're all allowed to do whatever we want with Winnie the Pooh now, so...
Yeah.
There's
trademarks don't
going to
exist.
be ethical models that replace the unethical models, like the genie's out of the lamp and it's not going back in.
Yeah.
What was it? If you wait for your fate, you will receive it. If you take your fate, you will acquire it. That was
Poignant.
Dungeon Master.
No one's going to
2007.
keep me from my Mickey fanfic.
Oh boy! Oh boy, Hamish, I can't wait for this.
Okay, I'd already thought I'd made it a bit weird, but
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's not in the top 5 or even the top 10 impressions. But I look forward to making an Instagram reel about it in the near future.
Oh, God. Why did I do
Thank
that?
you so much.
It's all right. Thank you guys.
For
It's been
chatting
fun.
all things. We could, this conversation could go so much longer because there's so much to pull apart.
Yeah,
but,
there is.
Well, we didn't even get into LLMs. We were just talking about,
great prompting.
if an LLM creates an emotive storyline, is it real?
If Danu starts talking about military craft, how many minutes will it take us to get back on topic?
Hours.